Alright, so we're going to give this a shot. I've talked about um, analyzing or like giving some of the behind the scenes of my own poetry, and I had recently talked about my poem Sugar Rush, so I thought I'd give it a shot and try talking about this. I don't know if this is going to be a thing I do all the time. I think it's going to depend on what people like, if there's good response to this, if people want to hear more, that kind of thing. I mean, this could end up being like a subtext about the poem or about me or, a footnote kind of thing. I don't know. Um, so yeah, we'll get into it. This is my poem, Sugar Rush. I have seen you grab their hand and pull them away from me, faces obscured by unreadable contortions. Sometimes they pull like taffy, saltwater candy that strings and breaks and surrenders to the hook, hook, hook figure eight of pull and twist. Sometimes they sever like hard sugar candy, a clean and brittle break with flakes like particulate that saturates the space they used to be. But you never come for me. You will leave my hands empty and shaking with the effort of not breaking into fractured sugared pieces that melt on their own because they are corn syrup. I was not made with isomalt. Pull away the mold and I will dissolve into an amorphous cacophony of discordant color. I am an unreadable contortion, spreading thin and thin to fill a space with a hole bigger than me. So thin I could evaporate, but I am a puddle of myself. You have pulled them away from me. So I wrote this really kind of about my depression, but I feel like it applies to like people with anxiety or other mental issues, mental health, that kind of thing. Because oftentimes it feels like there's something outside of your control that is pulling things away from you, pulling people away from you, pulling things you enjoy away from you. Like when I end up going into a depressive episode, what really ends up happening a lot of the time is that there are things that I like doing that I know that help. Like being on threads, like writing, like reading, like doing subtext. So writing about other people's work, reading other people's poetry and talking about it, writing about it, that kind of thing. But when I'm dealing with depression, I I can't do a lot of those things. Like it feels like my depression is coming, and it's like grabbing their hand and pulling it away from me. Like, yeah, like it. You want to do things, you want to improve, you want to get better, but your mental health is holding you back from it because that's what it does, and that's how it is. And I know it's different for everybody. That's how it is for me. That's how it is for a lot of people, I'm sure. Like, I know anxiety can do the same thing, where you can be paralyzed by anxiety. Like my wife and I are really similar in that regard, where she has anxiety, I have depression, but sometimes the end result ends up being kind of the same. We just got there different ways. But so that's where this poem came from, was that idea of having that mental illness, that mental state, or that mental whatever, um, come in and take the things away that you like and take away the things that you enjoy and that you want to do in your life. And it obscures them, like it hides them, it pulls them away. Like you end up in this like fugue state or this fog state where you're not really sure what's going on. Like my depression I've often described as like a fog, like everything's just gray. Everything kind of blends into the horizon, so it's like you're in this big void of just everything is gray. You can't discern the difference in anything. You can't see past anything. You don't know if there is a horizon, if there is an end to the walls, and it just kind of absorbs everything into itself, and it's really easy to fall into just existing, but not really, if that makes any sense. And so that's where this idea of like the unreadable contortions come from. And then sometimes when you're trying to pull people, like when depression is trying to pull these things away from you, like I fight and I want to try to keep it there. So that's where like the pulling like taffy, because I'm trying so hard to hold on to these things, but it still doesn't work. And sometimes people try to hold back, like my wife, like if I'm in a situation where I'm withdrawing from her, and she's trying to fight with me, so she's like, it's like the pulling like taffy, like there's that resistance, like you don't really want it to happen, but it's constant. Like when you're making saltwater taffy, you're that constant hooking motion, and And then eventually it can break, and eventually it will break because you're pulling it off into tiny pieces. And sometimes the break is clean, like the hard candy, where you just snap it and that's it. And apparently my phone decided it was shake to provide feedback. Gotta stop talking with my hands. But so it's that idea of like that clean break where like no matter what, even if you want it to, it's just a clean severing of I want to be on threads, but now I'm depressed and I can't be, and that's just what it is. No matter what I want to do, I just can't get there. It's not whether it's a fight, it's not that. It's just it's a break. And then they have this line, but you never come for me. And honestly, I kind of went back and forth on this line a little bit and what it was really trying to say and what it really meant to me. And it's that idea, I think, that the depression or your like anxiety or whatever else is out there, like bipolar, it's not doing these things, like it's not coming for you specifically. It's taking away the things that you enjoy. Like my depression steals a lot from me, but it never comes just for me. It comes for the things that I love and the things that I enjoy. And so that's where the next line, you leave my hands empty and shaking with the effort of not breaking. Because you're trying so hard to hold it together and it's difficult. It's like that effort. So like when you're holding your hands, like when you're trying so hard and you shake with the effort of doing it, that's where I'm kind of talking about. That's where I'm kind of coming from, is like trying so hard to keep that from happening, but you can't, and you're not able to. Because that's just what it is. That's what mental health is. That's what dealing with mental issues is. That's what depression is. It's not something that you can just stop. Like, there's something wrong with me, sure, but it's not like I'm broken. It's not like there's something inherently wrong that way. I just have something going on, and it's something I'm learning to manage, and I'm trying to manage, and I'm using medication to try to help manage. And so that's when I've said before, and I'm sure people have seen me talk about this a little bit before too, just on threads or on my website, or even in poetry. Like, I might be depressed, but I'm not broken. And the reason I say I'm not broken, the reason I say that you're not broken, is because there's nothing inherently wrong with us. We have depression, we have anxiety. We're not broken because of it. We might be at a disadvantage, certainly, but we're not broken. We're not any less than anybody else. Sometimes we just need some extra help, and that's fine. And sometimes we need to sleep in, or sometimes we just need to take a nap, or sometimes we need to just not do anything, and that's fine. But it's like learning how to manage it. It's not like something is broken and you can't fix it. Like, there's nothing that needs fixed. We need to manage it, we need to cure it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. But that's where that came from. And so then, my wife watches a lot of like the cooking and like the candy and the baking shows, and so some of this language bled in, which is the idea of like the corn syrup and the isomalt. Because like when you make like a hard sugar candy out of isomalt, it'll actually like break. But if you do it out of corn syrup, it'll melt because it's not made for that. And so that was that line there, like they're gonna melt because they're corn syrup. I was not made with isomalt. So like isomalt, when you make it, you can make like the sugared glass and stuff like that, and it'll stay there. Even in room temperature, it won't melt. But if you do use corn syrup, it'll melt. So saying that I'm made of corn syrup and not isomalt means that like I'm not able to hold it together by myself. Like sometimes I need help. And the next lines fall into that, like pull away the mold and I will dissolve. Like, so the depression, whatever, like there's all these things that go on and go into it and go into how I feel and how you feel and how you deal with this kind of stuff, where sometimes it's just pure will that lets you keep your shape. And so this idea of the mold, like there are times where I thought that medication might have been working, or I thought that might have been getting better, and it turns out I was like willing myself into this false high and thinking like, oh, I'm okay, I'm over this now, when I wasn't. And so the mold pulls off and I collapse because I'm not made of the right stuff. I mean, that's not really the way how I feel, but that's kind of the idea, you know? So like, yeah, you're not made of the right stuff. Like, so the idea of the mold, Because sometimes that's just how you feel. You're just a mess, just a puddle on the floor. Um, and then so they're moving on, spreading thin and thin to fill a space with a hole bigger than me. So thin I could evaporate, but I'm a puddle of myself. You have pulled them away from me. Like that idea of, well, like it's like thin and thin to fill a space with a hole bigger than me. Like depression can do that, and it can feel like I'm being spread so thin that I can't do anything because I don't have enough of myself left to pull up and to stand up and to do anything. And it's tough and it's hard, and the idea that you want to just be able to just let go and just be done with it, but you can't. Like I can't evaporate because I'm not made of a material that can evaporate, you know? It's not like so there's that struggle there, and it's because depression keeps taking it away from you. And look, so then I really like what I do with a lot of my poetry is the idea of like juxtaposition and like dichotomies. And so the sugar rush, the candy, the things that you typically see as like nice things and stuff like that, but twisting it in a way where it talks about depression and it talks about that. And I always really like to try to push boundaries and push images when I'm writing poetry. And then dealing with the repetition, line breaks, like so I have and surrenders to the hook, and then there's a line break, hook, figure eight of pull and twist. And so you deal like you use that idea of the hook, and then it's still like you hook to the next line, and so you're doing it visibly in the poem as well as verbally in the poem. And then the idea of the repetition and stuff like that, there's just a lot to it. There's a lot that goes into writing poems, and I think everybody that writes or does art knows this. But it's not like this stuff just comes to me all the time. Like some of these poems take days to write. Like sometimes I'm lucky and I can write a poem in 10 minutes, and that's it. That's not all the time. And there are some times where I'll sit and I'll stare at a line for, 5-10 minutes, trying to decide if that's the right line, if that's what works, if that's how it goes. And I'll read through and read through and read through and read through to see if everything's still working. Because sometimes I'll come up with a line or a stanza that I love, but then as I go back and read through the poem in its entirety, I realize it doesn't fit there. And so I either have to take it out, or I have to rewrite something, or I have to move it, or use it in a different piece. That happens all the time. But I always like to, when I write something and I have an idea of what I'm writing and I have an image in mind, I stop, I read through the image, and then I see how can I push this further. And I think that's something I really need to talk about more. And I don't know if that's I need to write a poem and kind of walk through it as the process that I'm doing it, or if it's something I can just write through or talk through more in depth and have some better examples and actually be prepared to do it instead of just on my lunch break talking about a poem I wrote. But yeah, I've talked about trying to do these videos. I've talked about trying to do a podcast, and I feel like it's finally time to start doing some of that. And it's just trying to find time and trying to make it all work. And it can be difficult sometimes because, like, I get home and I've only got a few hours left before I've got to go to bed because of the hours that I work, and I want to spend them with my wife, or I don't want to take up space in the house. And there's just things that way. So I'm on my lunch break at work right now, sitting in my car. And I don't always have the car because my wife and I usually commute, but she got a snow day because it was like -16 with the wind chill, and so they canceled school. And so I took advantage of that. But so that's the main thing. I'm trying to find time to do this, and I want to do this. I really enjoy doing this. It's fun to talk about this stuff and act like I'm having a dialogue, because I am having a dialogue. I don't have to act like it because I am, because I'm talking to you. I'm talking to people that are watching this video or that read my work. And it's something I'm really passionate about, something I love, and I hope that comes through, and I hope you can see that. And that's why I do the subtext thing, where I write about other people's work. I think I'm probably going to start doing that just once a month. I think I was burning myself out doing it every weekend, and I think that got too much, and I'll see about doing that. But I'd like to be able to do like some videos here and there, do some readings here and there, do subtext here and there, and do some blog posts here and there. So you're going to see me kind of playing around and experimenting with stuff until I find things that stick, and then I find a way to make it sustainable, and so I can keep doing it while I'm doing everything else that I'm doing. Because I have to eat, I have to work, I need a job, I need a roof over my head. So, that's kind of the idea behind the poem Sugar Rush. It's kind of the idea of how I think about my depression sometimes and how I think about writing. And I really want to talk more about this, and I want to do more. So let me know if you guys are interested in this. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know if I'm not the best at this, because I'm probably not, but that's okay. So yeah, I'll see you later.